Dead by Daylight should be one of my favorite horror games ever. In part, I think it is. But it also isn't? Actually, I think I might hate it. Since around the start of 2021, I've played this game almost every single day, even though it has resulted in an almost equal amount of frustrated outbursts both from me and the people I regularly play with. After a certain point, I felt that it wasn't enough to just vent those frustrations with my friends. So now I'm going to share them with all of you. I'm going to talk about the things that work, the things that really don't, and the general struggles a game developer has to face when creating horror that's meant for more than one player. Before I get started though, at the time of recording, I've played around 360 hours of Dead by Daylight. 390 if we add the amount of hours I've played it on PC. The highest survivor rank I've reached is 1, and the highest killer rank is like 8 or 7. That being said, that doesn't actually mean that I'm any good at this game, and I definitely don't try to play it like a pro. If you look at the gameplay I've captured for this video and can't stop yourself from typing how bad I am, and that the reason why I don't like the game is because of how bad I am, keep in mind that most people are not experts at the games they play. But if they like a game, they manage to have a good time anyway. I'm not talking as an expert on Dead by Daylight, but as a fan of horror. There are plenty of games that make a good case for why games shouldn't always be fun to play, but the feeling I get when playing Dead by Daylight is that it's trying to be. And it could be, for everyone, but right now, it isn't. It's also worth noting that since this is a multiplayer game, it's constantly being updated and changed in both small and drastic ways. The pros and cons I will be discussing here might not be around anymore when you watch this video 1, 5, or 10 years from now. Hell, maybe even a week from now. But as of right now, Dead by Daylight has been out for 5 years, and many of its issues are still on a bafflingly fundamental level. But I don't want to just complain about this game. So let's start with the good stuff. Part 1. The supposedly intended experience. Everyone who's ever watched a slasher film has at some point wondered, could I survive that? Could I be the one who defeats the killer at the end? The answer is no, you absolutely couldn't. In fact, you'd probably be the first one to die, and Dead by Daylight is here to prove it. You and 3 other players, either friends or complete strangers, are placed inside a trial where the goal is to activate 5 generators and escape, either through one of the 2 exit gates or a particularly hard to find hatch, before a killer finds and murders you all. The lore explains that you've all been abducted at various points in time by a mysterious spider-like god that's simply called the Entity. In order to sustain itself, the Entity requires human sacrifices, and whether they like it or not, it's now the job of the killers to deliver them. This cycle of death and despair repeats over and over again as the survivors are endlessly revived at a campfire, Dark Souls style, to be sacrificed once again. It's a truly terrible fate for these poor people, but it works as a neat in-world explanation to explain why you keep seeing and keep playing as the same characters, even though they've died or escaped multiple times. There are several survivors to choose from, all with their own set of personal perks. For example, Dwight can make generator repairs go faster when working with other survivors. Nia can move faster while crouching, and David can perform a dodge move to avoid getting hit by the killer. You can also unlock additional non-personal perks by spending blood points that you earn after every trial. Or you can spend them on medkits, toolboxes, maps, keys, and flashlights, and add-ons that lengthen the amount of time the items can be used or grant them special abilities. Although it is possible to defend yourself without any items. Around the map you will find pallets that you can drop in front of the killer to stun them for a couple of seconds, giving you an opportunity to either run or hide. There are also plenty of windows to vault through, which can give you an advantage since it takes longer for killers to get through windows than it does for survivors. You can also hide inside of lockers, with the downside that the killer can instantly grab you if they find you in one. If you're spotted and the killer starts to hunt you, the trick is to not be out in the open, but to run to a place on the map where there are plenty of pallets, windows, walls, and obstacles which you can loop and hide around. This will both buy your teammates some time to work on generators in peace, and you'll be able to stun and or confuse the killer so that you can escape the chase. If you fail and get hit by the killer, you enter the injured state. Your character starts to whimper in pain and leaves traces of blood after them, making it a lot easier for the killer to find you. One more hit and you enter the dying state. This gives the killer the opportunity to attach you to a sacrificial hook, where if you're not saved in time, it's game over. Or in the case you've already been hooked twice before, you'll die instantly. And you really don't want to die because, well, dying is bad actually. It also puts a lot more pressure on the survivors who are still alive to repair the remaining generators before they too are killed. It's not like you just find a generator, push a button and skip away to the next one. You have to sit there, hold down a button, and watch as the progress bar fills up. The game will then randomly throw you skill checks, forcing you to pay attention. If you time them just right, you'll even get a small but valuable progression boost. This process can take a lot of time, especially if you're working alone, and it will take even longer if you fail your skill checks, resulting in the generator exploding. This alerts the killer of your position. The nail-biting suspense of having to be completely stationary, while a killer could literally jump out at you at any moment, is a kind of perfect translation of how it feels to sit on a couch and watch a slasher film. The main difference is that, with voice chat, when you try to warn the cast that there is a bloody killer in the house, they will actually hear you and react to it. The only thing that is perhaps more heart-pounding, and satisfying if you manage to do it successfully, is to then hide from the killer when they're but a meter away from you. No stealth game I've played has topped the rush I got when the only thing that saved me from getting spotted was that the killer didn't look slightly to the right as they passed me. Don't expect that to happen often though. What you should expect is being found and killed. A lot. Speaking of translations, if there's anything that the developers at Behavior should get some serious credit for, it's how they've managed to adapt the characteristics of iconic horror villains into the game's mechanics. You see, you don't just play as the survivors in Dead by Daylight. You can also play as the killer. Michael Myers from the Halloween series of films, for instance, is well known for menacingly observing his victims from afar. So Behavior gave him an ability that immediately puts survivors in the dying state if he stops and stares at them before engaging, which encourages Michael players to stalk their prey just like Michael Myers would. And as a survivor, working on a generator only to suddenly see Michael just standing behind a tree is thrilling as hell. Ghostface from Scream and Amanda Young from Saw are more jump scare type of killers, so they have the ability to turn off their terror radius, the audio cue that alerts survivors of their presence, making them very good at surprise attacks. Freddy Krueger is a dream demon, so he can pull survivors into the dream world, where they are vulnerable to his traps. Behavior even succeeded at making Nemesis an unpredictable and relentless pursuer, where the 2019 remake of Resident Evil 3 failed. You could say that they're pretty good at programming behavior. This joke was written by Matt and I will not be held responsible for it. They also made some original killers of their own. Some are fairly basic and straightforward, like the Trapper, who places bear traps, and some who can be a little harder to master, like the Nurse, who can teleport short distances but quickly gets slowed down and exhausted by it. These abilities are not based on perks. Like the survivors, killers do get their own set of personal perks, and they can also use blood points to upgrade them, and buy various one-use add-ons to make themselves a little tougher to deal with. But unlike survivors, they always keep their basic abilities regardless of what build you choose. Being the one that hunts rather than the hunted offers a different kind of rush, the power fantasy kind. There's something really cathartic about dying over and over again, only to switch to playing as the killer and, depending on the skill level of the survivors, feel absolutely unstoppable. The Nurse is an excellent example, since her ability to teleport allows her to phase through walls, floors, or really any type of obstacle the survivors can hide behind. If you can play the Nurse well, the survivors have almost no means of defending themselves. It's delightfully evil. However, the greatest weapon that any killer has is information. Specifically, information that the survivors don't have. At the start of every trial, the survivor's main task is to locate the generators. The killer, on the other hand, can see the locations of all generators from the get-go, so even when the killer doesn't know where you are, they know where you will be, eventually. You should never take victory for granted, though. You might have the power, but they have the numbers. You have a whole map to cover on your own, while the survivors can be all over the place at once. It's not enough that you know the tools in your belt. You have to use them efficiently and with confidence. If a survivor lures you into a loop, you need a strategy to break it. And then break the survivor. You need to know when it's time to pursue, and when it's time to get back to patrolling generators. If you find one that's been worked on, you can kick it to reduce the survivor's progress, which ultimately might be more important than killing them as quickly as possible. If they do finish all the generators, there's still a chance to get some kills. Getting to an exit might take the survivor some time, and then it takes some more time to get one open, giving you a chance to catch up. When one is opened, a timer starts counting down, and if there are any survivors who are still in the trial when the time is up, they get grabbed by the entity and die instantly. There's no real win state in the traditional sense, but there is a performance review based on 4 categories. When playing as the killer, it's brutality, deviousness, hunter, and sacrifice, and when playing as survivor, it's objectives, survival, altruism, and boldness. How well you do in each category determines how many blood points you receive, and if you rank up, down, or stay the same. 20 being the lowest, and 1 being the highest. The rank is then supposed to get you into trials with people of equal rank. Supposed to. Even if you prefer one role over the other, it's important to have at least a basic understanding of both to excel at playing either. Not just because you'll have first-hand experience of how the various characters and killers work, but because you'll have an easier time relating to the players you're up against and what they might be thinking in any given situation. It might not save you, but it might help you save your friends. Or if you are the killer, you can just hook someone and never leave them because that's the only way you're gonna get a single kill this trial. Okay, I don't think I can hide my grievances any longer, so let's talk about part 2, the actual experience. One of the scripts that was considered for the 6th Nightmare on Elm Street film was actually co-penned by none other than the Lord of the Rings director Peter Jackson. It was called A Nightmare on Elm Street 6, The Dream Lover. In this version of the film, Freddy would be so weak that the teens of Springwood started taking sleeping pills to enter his nightmare world on purpose just so they could bully him. Imagine that. One of the most famous horror icons of all time being a vulnerable laughingstock. Well, turns out that you don't need to imagine it at all, because Dead by Daylight will gladly let you know exactly what that film would have looked like. Hell, you don't even need to play as Freddy Krueger. You'll be treated like garbage regardless of what killer you pick, or even which survivor you pick. Fuck! I've been playing competitive video games online longer than many Dead by Daylight players have been alive. I'm used to the rudeness, which is why I truly mean it when I say that Dead by Daylight has the most toxic player base I've ever seen in any video game. And the worst thing is, even if it isn't intentional on behavior's part, the game indirectly encourages that toxicity. Survivors will teabag after they've stunned you, blink their flashlights in your face, literally run circles around you, and even wait at opened exit gates just so they can give you a final non-verbal fuck you before they leave. How much you're personally offended by it doesn't matter. If a survivor is deliberately running up to you at an exit gate to take advantage of the speed boost they gain when you hit them, it's not just cocky. It's dicky. It's pure penis. The flashlights might just be the worst thing though. As a survivor, it's nice to have some kind of weapon that temporarily blinds the killer, especially since blinding them allows carried survivors to escape the killer's grasp. But when you're about to start a trial as a killer, and you see that 3 out of 4 survivors are bringing flashlights with them, you know that you're about to be harassed to hell and back. Huh. I am the devourer of light! The killer players aren't that much better though. Let's take a fairly standard situation as an example. The survivors have just finished their last generator. The killer hasn't been able to kill a single player so far. So when they get a hold of one, right before the others have managed to open a gate, they hook that survivor and stay there until the survivor dies. Face camping, as it's called. Actually, the killer doesn't even need to wait until the end of the trial to do this, because if the killer suspects that they won't be able to get a kill otherwise, there's absolutely no incentive for them to move. The survivors then will be pissed because the killer is face camping, and the killer will be pissed if the survivors somehow manage to save their friend anyway. Well, there are 3 against 1, right? Surely the killer can't defend the hook against all of them at once. Oh, sweet child. Let's talk about one-hit downs. Not only are there killers like Leatherface who can put you into the dying state with a single attack, there are also various perks, and more specifically hexes, that grant any killer the ability to do it. One of the most infamous hexes that can do this is one called No One Escapes Death, or NOED for short. If there are any totems left on the map when the final generator is finished, one of them will light up and activate NOED. As long as the totem is lit, every hit from the killer will put you in the dying state, meaning that a killer could potentially change the whole outcome of a trial in just the last couple of minutes. While that's kind of exciting on paper, it more often than not creates frustration, especially if you're in a situation where the killer is face camping. Sure, you could try and find the lit totem and destroy it, but you might not have the time or the perks to find it. So either you try to lure the killer away, at the risk of getting killed yourselves, or you leave your friend to die. Both alternatives suck, not because someone will inevitably die, which is something you have to be prepared for, but because the power dynamic is flipped so hard to the killer side that it doesn't feel fair. The killer player doesn't want to have a bad time because they can't kill anyone, so now everyone has to have a bad time. Survivors definitely have their own set of perks that can be annoying for killer players, like Decisive Strike, that can free you from the killer's grasp if they catch you shortly after being unhooked, or Borrowed Time, that allows unhooked survivors to take an extra hit. These are a lot easier to predict and deal with though, since the killer can hit the survivor who's trying to unhook instead, or just wait long enough for Decisive Strike to deactivate. Personally, I don't have a problem with one-hit down attacks per se. Even Ghostface, one of my favorite killers, has one. But what differentiates that one from Leatherface's chainsaw, or a killer with the NOED or Devour Hope hex, is that it has a timer. If you've successfully marked a survivor as Ghostface, you have a relatively small window of opportunity to hunt them down and, well, down them. This creates a nice ebb and flow of tension throughout the trial. You don't feel completely screwed when you're marked, but the stakes are definitely raised. I still use these hexes though, because as much as I hate to admit it, I am a part of the problem just as much as any other player. If I've been treated poorly several times in a row, and have no luck with sacrificing survivors whatsoever, you bet I'm gonna use the cheapest possible means of getting the upper hand. The killer can aggravate the survivors even further by resorting to tunneling, as in picking one survivor at the start of the trial and then relentlessly hunt them down until they're hooked. If the survivor gets off the hook, the killer goes straight back there to down the survivor once again. The only thing that discourages you from using these tactics, or any tactic considered to be toxic, is if you understand how it feels to be on the receiving end of that kind of abuse, and decide not to do it out of empathy. There's this whole culture of etiquette that the Dead by Daylight community has had to create themselves. For example, everyone knows that hitting a hooked survivor is rude, but there is nothing in the actual game that encourages players not to be. So the cycle of toxicity just keeps going round and round and round. You get treated poorly by a killer, so you play as the killer and take out your aggressions on survivors who had nothing to do with it, who then go on to do the same to others. Round and round it goes. I think it says a lot about how dreary it can be to play this game when killers sometimes just completely step out of their role and start cooperating with the survivors because of how much of a hard time they're having. They either stand by as the survivors finish their generators, or allow a lone survivor to escape. While those moments are genuinely sweet, and proof that the community definitely isn't all bad, I think it further shows the fundamentally flawed nature of this game. Behavior created the characters, the perks, the objectives, and the maps, but gave almost all responsibility to make the game enjoyable to the players. And honestly, maybe you shouldn't trust random people with that task.
People like Coldplay and voted for the Nazis. You can't trust people, Jeremy.
If I had to summarize the more general experience of playing Dead by Daylight, I'd say that it's like a game of rock, paper, scissors, where it can take up to 20 minutes until you realize that you lost. And it mostly has to do with perks, add-ons, and ranks. Every character, killer or survivor, has their own 3 perks. But when you reach level 30 and beyond, those perks will become teachable, meaning that they can be used by any other character. This robs the playable characters of their individuality, since you can straight up replace their entire set of personal perks, and it makes it really hard to prepare yourself for any situation. This isn't entirely bad. Unpredictability is an essential part of effective horror after all, but it also allows players to use perk combinations that are frankly awful to deal with. I mentioned that one of the best parts of the game was being able to outsmart and sneak past a killer. Well, that will be very tricky if the killer has 4 different perks from 4 different killers that basically allows them to see you wherever you are and whatever you do. For example, if they use a set of perks containing barbecue and chili, a nurse's calling, hex undying, and disordinance, the killer will be able to spot you when a survivor is hooked, when you are healing, when you pass a totem, and when you're working on a generator with another teammate. This means that you will be spotted a lot, especially since you can't be sure that this killer is using these specific perks before the trial is over. Do they have a nurse's calling, or were they just very lucky when they found me? If I attempt to heal my teammate, would I be giving them a death sentence? You'll have no idea. It doesn't need to be an extreme case like this one either. Sometimes just a single perk can give a killer a hugely unfair advantage. Take Leatherface, who is the original owner of the barbecue and chili perk, or the Doctor, who can electrocute and reveal the locations of survivors in a relatively large proximity. If you're not close enough to remain undetected by barbecue and chili, or far away enough to avoid the Doctor's electrocution, the only way to not get spotted is to enter a locker. However, if either of these killers are using the perk Iron Maiden, not only will your location be revealed once you exit the locker anyway, you also suffer from the exposed status effect, which means that the killer can one-hit down you. I totally see the appeal in mixing these abilities and perks, finding creative ways to utilize them. But a lot of the time it almost feels like using cheat codes. I've heard the argument that no one escapes death is a crutch used by players who aren't very good. But the truth is that all perks are crutches. Actually, no. Crutches are a good thing. I wouldn't feel bad about using those, and neither should anyone else. I do, however, feel bad about using a lot of the perks in this game. Several add-ons are just as bad, if not worse. I will never forget the time when me and a couple of friends faced off against a Michael Myers player who killed me instantly without having put me on a hook even once. Then there's the Legion, my current favorite of the killers. They have some really solid perks and can use an ability called Feral Frenzy to run really fast, making it easier to gain control over the map. However, Legion's ultra rare add-ons, which aren't that ultra rare at all, are kind of ridiculous. Fuming Mixtape allows Legion to see how much survivors have progressed with generators while using Feral Frenzy, which is a way better version of a perk used by the pig. And the add-on Iridescent Button makes it so that your terror radius is heard all over the entire map, meaning that the survivors will be really stressed out by the constant intense music played directly into their ears, and have no idea where you are. It's definitely not impossible to survive a player using these add-ons, but it feels so shitty to use them, and even shittier to suffer from their effects. The problem with introducing a ranking system into the mix is that your skill level might depend entirely on these previously mentioned perks and add-ons. You might be excellent at playing as a specific killer, if you have the add-ons you prefer, but since they are single use, you won't always have them at your disposal. Imagine that you're really good at playing Mercy in Overwatch. Then suddenly, you can't use her resurrection ability 5 games in a row. Naturally, your performance would be affected by this. Determining your skill based on a simple 20-to-1 system then eliminates all the variables that actually cause you to perform well. This is something that the developers seems to be aware of though, since they've worked on fixing both the ranking system and the matchmaking. There's now an invisible rating system which supposedly predicts how well you will do against a given opponent and adapts the matchmaking accordingly. Behavior claims that they can make trials that are more objectively fair this way. While that sure sounds like an improvement, despite the impossibility of objective fairness in this case, this leaves us with a ranking system that Behavior themselves admit is misleading. If the ranking system doesn't actually represent your skill, there shouldn't be one. Although, in my personal experience, the players who tend to completely steamroll their opponents are more often than not players who do have higher ranks. So it is representative of your skill. Except when it isn't. Speaking of things that don't work properly, part error message. The game is literally broken! This is not hyperbole. It really is broken. Despite being 5 years old at the time of recording, one could easily be fooled into believing that Dead by Daylight is an early access game. And the worst part is that it's not because Behavior isn't trying to fix it, but because with every fix, they somehow manage to break something else. Every time! The menu cursor disappears, character models disappear, hair disappears, clothes that were meant to be unlocked through the season pass got randomly put into players' inventories, but instead of letting players keep them, Behavior just removed them. Players are constantly thrown out of their parties, but are still shown in the parties afterward. Interrupting a survivor's actions with a grab suddenly stops working, animations stop working or play at times when they shouldn't. And my personal favorite, getting stuck in the game environment. If there's a single moment I will always remember from my time playing Dead by Daylight, decades after the servers have inevitably closed, it's when I was but moments from escaping the trial, and suddenly got stuck to a fallen tree. I could run, but I couldn't move. No one was left to save me, and the killer had no idea where I was. The only thing I could do was wait for the timer to go down and die, which of course resulted in my rank going down. That there are actual esport tournaments held with this game when it's this busted is absolutely baffling to me. Rather than focusing on solving issues like these, Behavior seems to have a nasty habit of just releasing new killers and survivors instead, almost like a distraction. But since they don't seem to properly test the content before launching it, they just create additional problems. I feel genuinely sorry for the people who are looking forward to playing on the Resident Evil inspired Raccoon City map, only to have it be removed, literally hours after it was officially released. I'm no in-depth expert on game development, but maybe Behavior should have postponed the release if the content they were releasing didn't work. Then again, releasing unfinished content on purpose seems to be the norm these days. According to Behavior CEO,
Rémi Racine,
there's no crunch culture at the studio, which I highly appreciate. My enjoyment of this game should not come at the expense of people getting overworked. But to have a ranking system that punishes you for problems that the game itself is causing, and to have players keep paying for a game that hasn't been properly fixed in years, is a big problem. And speaking of big problems, Part 3. Microtransactions and numbers. The fact that microtransactions in video games have been normalized at this point doesn't make them any less predatory. And since I personally have a very impulsive mindset when it comes to spending money, I feel that I have an obligation to warn people of this particular aspect of the game. Apart from blood points and iridescent shards, which you earn from playing the game and leveling up, there are auric cells that you can use to buy characters and cosmetic items. You gain these auric cells by spending real-life money. Now, a lot of people argue that having to pay for in-game clothes with your hard-earned cash isn't that big of a deal since they don't affect the game. But I'd argue that those people underestimate the effects those clothes have on the players. Sure, you don't have to buy that outfit for your favorite character, but you want to, don't you? And eventually, you might cave in and do it. The longer you play the game, the more likely it is that you will come across other players who are wearing those clothes. You see, your fellow survivors aren't just your teammates. They're walking mannequins for the Dead by Daylight clothes store, regardless of how nice the developers at Behavior seem to be. And they do seem to be genuinely nice. There is no ignoring the fact that they're trying to manipulate you into buying more stuff. That's just how the psychology behind microtransactions works. There are no Overwatch-style loot boxes, thank God. You actually get what you're paying for. Still, having to pay $10 for in-game outfits is frankly outrageous. There are whole games that go on sale that are cheaper than that. Despite it not being a free-to-play game, the progression system has a similar flavor of grindiness to it as a free-to-play game. You don't just go into a menu and look up the specific item you want to spend your blood points on. Instead, there are these blood webs that artificially limit and complicate what you can and can't buy at any given time. Say that you got a new perk that you want to level up as quickly as possible. Well, you can't. Because first you have to go through a bunch of blood webs and waste the blood points you wanted to use for the perk on stuff you likely don't want at all. You might be lucky and find what you're looking for quickly, but unless you're strategic with the stuff you pick, the entity will block you from buying some of that stuff until it shows up on a future blood web. As a way of preventing players from exclusively buying the most powerful perks and add-ons, this is fairly effective. But isn't that kind of an admission that those perks and add-ons are overpowered if the developers don't want you to use them anytime you want? It just seems to me that Behavior designed the progression system this way, either because they're just trying to get you to stay for as long as possible to, again, expose you to the stuff that'll make you want to spend more money, or because they don't have the confidence that you will keep playing the game if there are no long-term goals. This all comes down to what I personally find to be the biggest issue with Dead by Daylight. It's not really a game about horror. It's a game about numbers. The number of minutes and hours you're engaged, the number of points you get at the end of trials, the number of challenges you're able to finish before the season is over, and the number of dollars you're willing to spend on additional content. During the 5-year anniversary of the game, you could read several quotes from various developers in the game's loading screens. One of these developers claimed that if you had fun, then you've already won. That's not true though, is it? Because the game's only measurement of victory is the numbers. And they might tell you that you didn't do good enough. It doesn't matter if you manage to survive. You can get a bad score and D-rank anyway. That isn't fun. The points prioritize specific actions, how often or how long you perform them, over the horror experience of the trial as a condensed slasher story. In these stories, every player is an improvising actor, contributing to the experience. But a boring or just plain bad trial can reward you a lot more than a narratively exciting one. A selfless sacrifice to save a friend might be a satisfying way to go out, but the game may deem that you haven't had much more use than that, and show no sympathy for that selflessness. If you've managed to stealthily avoid the killer almost completely throughout an entire trial, a blood-pumping experience to say the least, you might be penalized because you weren't chased enough. The game then is telling you to deliberately put yourself in harm's way for literally no reason other than the points you would receive from it, which could be one of the reasons why survivors tend to harass killer players. Maybe I've just misunderstood the game though. A dear friend of mine once pointed out that while it has the aesthetics of a horror game, maybe it shouldn't be considered as one. Trying to pull off various tasks while being stalked by some terrifying villain does describe a fairly huge chunk of the horror game genre. But by making the villain playable, and making the goal more about gathering points, the game has a dominantly competitive aspect that horror games usually don't. Although, I still feel that Dead by Daylight could be a proper horror game if Behavior wanted it to be. Part 4. Conclusion. There is another little co-op horror game that you might have heard of called Left 4 Dead 2. Like Dead by Daylight, you play as one of 4 survivors, or as a killer, called a Special Infected in this case. 2 teams play through a series of levels where one has to get to a safe room and the other has to stop them. The team with the most points at the end of the last level wins. However, this isn't the main game mode. In the standard mode, you're going through the same levels while battling a sort of AI director that adapts the zombie hordes, how big they are and how frequently they attack, based on how good or bad you are at the whole surviving thing. And survival is the only goal. Sure, there are some numbered stats presented by the end of every level, but there's no reward for having killed the most zombies. It's just a very matter-of-fact type of deal. Daniel was really good at hitting headshots, while you dealt the most damage to tanks. The numbers tell you how good or bad you're doing without downplaying your accomplishments, because in the end, it's about the journey, not the numbers. You might not make it onto the escape helicopter at the end of the last level, but as long as you gave those zombies hell and managed to help your friends, it still feels pretty good when the credits starts rolling. But first, you actually have to get that far. And the only way you'll do that is if you stick together. Left 4 Dead 2 highly incentivizes cooperative play by making some of the zombie ambushes so overwhelming that you basically need to keep everyone else alive in order to stay alive yourself. Dead by Daylight, on the other hand, kind of encourages you to let your friends die when things start to go south, so that you can escape the trial alone when the hatch opens. One of the reasons, if not the main reason, why I reached the highest survivor rank in the game was because my fellow survivors were unlucky enough to get the killer's attention more than me. Either because the killer didn't find me as often, or because I mistakenly turned the killer's attention over to my teammates by passing them during a chase. You'll probably want to cooperate in the early game, but especially when you're playing with strangers, there is this persistent feeling that someone will eventually screw you over if it means that they get to leave the trial alive. I bring up Left 4 Dead 2 not just because it's an example of a co-op horror game done right, but because I believe that the solution to one of Dead by Daylight's biggest problems would be to introduce multiple game modes. Not necessarily where the killer or the survivors are controlled by an AI, just alternatives to the one and only ranked game mode the game currently has. Okay, you can also play custom games with people from your friends list, which is a lot of fun, but personally, I don't find that to be enough. I want to see game modes where players can only use perks specific to their character of choice, or modes where there are no perks or add-ons whatsoever. I want to see game modes that experiment with the setup. Maybe there could be 8 survivors and 2 killers, or a single generator that takes a lot longer to repair, or something that replaces generators altogether. Most of all though, I want to see a game mode that doesn't grade your performance, and allows you to have unhindered fun with the amazingly intense slasher film experience that Dead by Daylight could be. It would obviously not fix every problem. Many issues are on such a fundamental level that it might require an entirely new game to fix them. I do, however, believe that it would make the game a lot more enjoyable, and perhaps even a little less toxic, if players who were playing to win at all cost, and players who just want to have fun, weren't forced to share the same space all the time. What makes Left 4 Dead 2 work so bloody well as a cooperative horror experience is that the game itself, or more specifically the AI director, actively works to make your experience both challenging and narratively interesting. It raises the stakes when you're ready for it, and it allows you some downtime when you desperately need to heal up and gather supplies. A trial in Dead by Daylight, however, is solely directed by the players themselves. While the human element offers the unpredictability that horror needs, horror also requires at least some level of seriousness. If the xenomorph in Alien Isolation started teabagging outside of a locker you're hiding in before killing you, it would kill any and all tension along with it. In Dead by Daylight, stuff like that is basically standard, and there might not be a way to discourage players from doing that stuff completely, but it's worth trying to do at least something about it. During a developer Q&A stream back in February 2018, somebody asked about this, kind of. They claimed that playing as the killer had gotten frustrating and stressful, and that no one feared the killer anymore. Game director
Mathieu Seto's
response was sadly more worrying than comforting.
Well, I would say maybe try Survivor for a bit. No, but it's true. I mean, change it up. Maybe you're just tired, you know, or play something else for a week. Try Civilization or something, just for a refreshing change. Balance is, I shouldn't be saying that. Should I be saying that? It's a good game, just play that. No, Bjorn is telling me I shouldn't be saying that. Okay.
This clip has been shared around a lot out of context, so I feel that it's important to clarify that his full answer is a bit longer than this. But when a game director's first response to a question regarding the game's quality is, play something else, it definitely doesn't sit right. But that's kind of emblematic of the whole game, isn't it? Even on its 5th anniversary, the game is still a broken mess. Either you tolerate it and buy even more content for it, or you can go and play something else. I want this game to be fixed, but considering its history, it would seem that the issues I have with it will either be fixed years in the future, or not at all. Despite all of the complaints I've made, and trust me, I have plenty more that did not make it into this video, I really like this game, except when I really don't. I love the idea of asymmetrical horror games, but right now, I feel that there aren't any that can be considered to be genuinely excellent. I was kind of hoping that the 2017 Friday the 13th game was going to fill that position. It had an iconic killer, big maps, and a variety of ways to plan your escape. But not only is Friday the 13th kind of a mess as well. In 2020, the dedicated servers were shut down due to litigation over the rights to the franchise.
Jesus Christ.
My name is Beautiful, yes?
Thank you.
I hate you all.
Maybe some other asymmetrical horror game will eventually come around and completely blow our minds away. But until then, it seems like Dead by Daylight is the best we have. I just hope that it gets better, while I still have a desire to play it. Actually, scratch everything I've said. The real biggest problem with Dead by Daylight is the fucking Huntress. Every time you face her, she starts humming this melody, and she basically never stops. When she starts getting near you, you're gonna hear this repetitive ear torture over and over and over and over again. You will even hear it when you're playing as her, which is even worse because at least as a survivor, you might be too far away to hear it. But you can't escape yourself! Can someone please make it stop? Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please consider becoming a patron. Not only will you help me and the channel a lot, you also get early access to all future videos, and to our Discord server. And speaking of patrons, I want to give a special thanks to Nichtschwert, Rocky Dennis, Tobias Mattsson, Håvard Krugerud, Professor Flowers, Vinders, Philippe Kirschner, Oddshrew, Mackenzie Pollock, Eli Berg-Moss, Rob Robbins, and Seth Sard. I also want to thank Pinkbat Lynn, Thug4000, and Matt Cox for proofreading the script. You'll find their links in the description. Matt actually proofreads professionally, so if you're doing any kind of creative writing yourself, I highly recommend his services. Oh, and I also want to thank my dear friend Lynn. If it weren't for you, I would not have given this game another shot. I've obviously had a lot of bad experiences with Dead by Daylight, but thanks to you, I didn't miss out on the good ones.